For those of us that are either like a lot of firstborn moms or the high achieving mom or the ones that, were really busy and active and involved in their youth, that's a big population that we see burnout in, but they're not ascribing to I'm burned out. They're ascribing to like, I'm lazy. I need to just get over it.
Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Worthy Mother Podcast. We are going to be talking today about burnout and specifically how the mental load of motherhood can contribute to burnout and what we can do about that. Because there's a lot of factors to why we may be experiencing burnout in motherhood that maybe we don't have so much control over. And it's important to really explicitly talk about what we do have control over and how we can make steps to, release some of that pressure and stress that so many of us feel. I was just reading a CNN article from earlier this year, and it said that 2/3 of moms say they feel burned out. And that's obviously a huge issue. This is something I think so many of us can relate to, whether it's we're experiencing that currently or we have experienced it. And so I really just want to dig in. And so I'm joined today by Velo, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist who, after becoming a mom, she shifted her own practice to support moms who are struggling with the motherhood adjustment. And so, Megan, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to dig into this today. Can you just tell us about yourself and the work you do?
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I always like having these conversations just to normalize these feelings and kind of get the information out there. So, yeah, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I practice in California. I am all virtual right now, but I also am really exploring the Instagram world and trying to share more content on there, normalize all the various emotions of motherhood on there to reach moms outside of California too. So I have two kids, 4 and a 2-year-old. So I'm not quite like in the postpartum fog, but I'm kind of in the trenches still, I feel like. So I can relate to a lot of what I share, and most of it is coming from what I'm processing in my own world too. So yeah, that kind of fuels my passion for working with moms in the trenches of motherhood.
Yeah, I have been really loving your content on Instagram. I think there's so much work being done normalizing things that are fairly normal experiences in motherhoods that can, feel shameful if we're not talking about it. And also just the way you are offering little easy tips and pieces of advice that, we can all take and say, okay, I needed this today and this is something I can take in my own world. So I think you're doing a really wonderful job just
Thank
sharing a lot
you.
of great things.
Thanks.
So I think a lot of us understand, right, the immense load that mothers carry. We can feel it. We
Oh
know that
yeah,
we are
for sure.
taking on a lot. But I know that in my own experience, actually naming exactly what I'm carrying and what factors are contributing to that has been really impactful. And then kind of releasing some of the, I guess, guilt around it and having more self-compassion for myself of this is hard. This is damn
Mhm.
hard, and it's
Mhm.
okay that I'm struggling. And
Mhm.
also, I can do something about that. So how would you define the mental load? How would you explicitly name the load that so many moms are carrying? Kind of more generally, I guess, because I know obviously for different moms, there's going to be different things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like the mental load is the weight that we carry to kind of keep our family moving forward. And that is going to look different in every family system and how they function. But, to individually kind of do some introspection of what am I responsible in the process of moving our family day to day? And for most moms, I feel like it's a lot more than we actually recognize. Generally speaking, we are typically the ones that are making sure that, they're signed up for camps or they're registered for school or, daycare is taken care of. And I mean, there are going to be family systems where that's shared and that's awesome. But the moms that I'm working with are the ones that are typically carrying a lot of that weight. And then we have the moms that are working on top of that. And so that's going to add a complexity to that mental load as well, because they're also carrying the load of work stress too. So when I think of mental load, I think of what makes your brain tired to think about. And a lot of times that's feels very minimal. It's like, oh, we ran out of strawberries. But like that's just another thing that's keeping your mind going and not giving yourself really the ability to just be like, oh, I feel really peaceful and I feel at rest. Like the strawberries are going to pop in your mind and be like, oh yeah, I got to go do that, you know? So that's to me what the mental load is.
Yeah, it's the things that make it so when you are sitting on the couch trying to just get some peace and quiet and rest, it's not necessarily going to be as restful and, productive in that way because your mind is going, going, going. And I think you said something
Mhm.
interesting there that, in some families that load is shared more, but I think there's something to be said about the fact that as a society, we expect that the moms will have that stuff taken care of, right? And so there's just
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
complexities even to the conversation there of like, even if that load is more shared, it still kind of is on the mom, in an outward way to make sure
Yeah.
that the kids are doing what they need to be doing and being parented in a way that is deemed like the right way by society and all these things that it is hard to escape the extra stuff that contribute to the load. And then,
Mhm.
just the fact that there are things like needing to go to the grocery store and make sure our
Mhm.
kids have food and, the things that just are like actually real responsibilities we have
The
as
day to
parents.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about burnout, then what is burnout? Is there like a threshold you have for like calling the experience of that pressure actually burnout? Like what qualifies as burnout?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm sure that there's like burnout assessments out there that you could probably take and it would tell you if you're burned out or not. But a big focus for me in working with my clients is just self-awareness. So
Hmm.
if you're feeling like you're burned out, like we're going to accept that as truth, you know? And
Yeah.
a lot of times there's a denial of the burnout. And so working towards the acceptance of that is definitely part of the process. But when I think of burnout, I think of just like mental exhaustion, physical exhaustion. It's not quite depression. You know, you're maybe not experiencing like crying frequently or low mood or lack of interest in activities, but I think of it more of like a just like general feeling of just worn out, exhaustion, and disconnected, you know, just lack of drive because you feel like you just don't even want to get up and do the things that you feel like you should be doing. And so I've talked before on my Instagram about how like burnout is it can be chronic, it can be like months and like years long, but it also can feel really short-lived. You can have weeks where you're starting to experience some burnout. And then if things change in your external world or you're able to implement some different skills, then maybe that burnout decreases a little bit. So I really kind of think of it as like almost like a rating scale of where you're at in burnout. And I think if we're able to do some of that self check in of like, hey, on a
Yeah.
scale of 0 to 10, 0 being like no burnout at all, I'm feeling really good, 10 being most burned out I've ever felt, like where am I at this week? It really is helpful for us to have that awareness of how much we are taking on and how much it's really impacting us during that time of our life. So I think it's good to do that introspective work and really ask that hard question.
Yeah, I think there's something important there of being able to reflect and being open to what that reflection will bring you, right? To say, you know what, this actually is something I need to address. Sometimes that can be hard to like even open ourselves up to that possibility. But I think
Hmm.
something that I've noticed just in content and, being surrounded by conversations about burnout, particularly for moms and for women and for entrepreneurs, and, different like sectors of people, that there can be some amount of like gatekeeping of what it means to be burned out.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important, like what you said, that it's really like the awareness of like, am I functioning in a way that I want to be functioning, or is this not working for me? Am I like
Yeah.
so drained and exhausted? And it's like, that's enough to say, okay, I need to start making some changes. I need to start addressing this because we shouldn't be having to function like that just because we're not, at the rock bottomest rock bottom. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think the hard thing is like, you know, for those of us that are either like a lot of firstborn moms,
mhm,
or the high achieving mom, or the ones that, you know, were really busy and active and involved in their youth, that's a big population that we see burnout in, but they're not ascribing to I'm burned out. They're ascribing to like I'm lazy. I need to just get over it. Like so many moms have it worse than me. So there's also shame within
mhm.
that cycle of burnout too, of just like accepting that like I'm tired today or I'm tired this week or I'm really struggling, there is a really difficult process to getting comfortable with saying those things that I walk through with a lot of women because there's just this really, really intense pressure to be able to do it all and be the best and not feel any emotions and feel a lot of guilt over the burnout or even just the negative emotions that sometimes come with motherhood. So that can be a really big roadblock and people just saying like, yeah, I'm going to check in with myself and see how burned out I am. Like some people are not even there yet. They're just like, no, like, mothers in the past like had it so much worse. They didn't have Target Drive Up and they didn't have, all these things. But I think that's definitely something to work through if you're feeling that resistance of doing that self-reflection.
Yeah. I mean, I relate so much to that as a firstborn mom.
Yep.
It is sometimes hard to admit it because it's not just us too who like, as the individual, I need to be doing everything, but we get told that, right? We see
Hmm.
that those messages in society and it's fed to us and really like solidified like, no, you need to be doing it all. You need to be the one who's caring for your kids in this way. And if you mess up, like it's all on you. And so
Hmm.
there is so much pressure. There's
Yeah.
something in that I'm really interested to kind of get into is like how burnout in mothers has changed and not necessarily like for individual moms what's changed from years and years ago, but what
Hmm.
factors do we see now that are contributing to like the mental load in a way where burnout is so prevalent?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound cliche, but the first one that comes to mind is social media. Like, moms before, they didn't have like the pressure, they didn't have the highlight reels in front of them. They didn't have the reminders that we only have 18 summers or whatever that is, like that just like it just wasn't a thing. They were so much more detached from all the traumas and the stresses and the pressures of that constant, source of absorbing media. They just didn't have that. And that can be such a trigger for us to feel like we need to feel happy about motherhood all the time. Like it's fleeting. So we need to be present for every moment. Like I know all of those posts mean well, like they're trying to remind us to just be present. But for some moms, it can actually trigger a lot of anxiety because they're like, oh my gosh, my kids are 6. That means I only have 12 more summers with them or whatever. That's a lot of pressure internally. So I feel like that's definitely one of them. I also think like as a society, and this probably differs from like place to place, but I know what I see in our community is a really big pressure to have your kids connected in everything, to start sports really young and to be have kind of your calendar packed full. And I think that can be a trigger of burnout too. It's hard because there's birthday parties, there's t-ball games, and I'm definitely guilty of this. I love to, have my kids go to fun camps and all that. But I think when your schedule is so packed out and we're having to remember, okay, this piece goes here and this person's picking up here and this person, like that is a really heavy load to carry versus being like, okay, we're going to have a free weekend this weekend and just see what happens and not really plan anything. So I think those two are probably the biggest contributors of why so many moms today feel burned out. And there's probably so many more components, but I do think that those two are probably some of the biggest.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And really, like, we are the first moms raising children in the social media world.
Yes.
Like, you think about what Instagram was 10 years ago, it wasn't the same
Yeah.
thing. It was like brand new, and
No.
we didn't have
Hmm.
like the influencer culture and things like that. And I think,
Right.
as the mom of a 5-year-old, I need to remind myself of that sometimes of like, we are literally the first ones doing this. And
Yes. So true.
there's a lot that comes with that.
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned, like just having all the input that we absorb, but also I think just a time sucker of what it is too. Like, I'm guilty of it too, but just like the ability to get sucked into scrolling,
Hmm.
you leave scrolling not feeling good. You're not sleeping as good. But also, like, what are those other hours? What could those be put towards to invest in yourself and really take care of yourself? And I don't mean never scroll because like that's just not reality for a lot
Yeah.
of us. Like we are going to do that. And so it's just a healthy balance of feeling like I'm not getting sucked into this trap and leaving feeling really anxious, but I'm going to maybe try to set healthy boundaries around that. So I also have some time to invest in myself or my relationship after the kids are, in bed or napping or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's a good reminder for everybody. Just
Yeah, I
they
don't
need
want to
to
be the
hear
social media
it.
police, but sometimes it's
No.
just a good reminder for
Yeah.
myself too of like, how do I feel at nighttime when I'm putting my phone down and I'm going to bed after absorbing all of that information?
Yeah, and it's such an easy thing. I mean, we all get sucked into it. And again, there's no shame in that. It's like we literally
Yeah,
like it's designed to do that, but it's also
exactly.
not necessarily the best thing for a lot of reasons.
Hmm.
So I do
Yes.
want to talk about like how we can kind of address burnout, but before we do, I want to just ask you something that is interesting with the experience of moms and a lot of times new moms, but I do see this like kind of going, it can maintain if we don't do anything about it, is kind of this sense of identity loss that can happen when we are dedicating so much to our kids and really like that kind of becomes our identity is like I'm a mother. And I'm wondering if
Hmm.
there's any ways, like in what ways that contributes to burnout.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I remember for me when I had my first, I was like, it was such a hard transition for me from 0 to 1 because you go from being such an independent person where you can just make the choices about yourself through the day. And I remember the first week after having my daughter, I was like, I literally can't even just like go to the grocery store if I wanted to. Like, I have to think about like, I was nursing. So like, what does that mean? And like, even just my own anxiety of leaving her and like, if I leave with her, all those
Hmm.
things. So I think even at the start of, that the newborn phase, it can be really difficult to even feel like yourself for a while. And I think that sometimes transcends into the years to come because you become so absorbed into what your kids need that by the time you even remember that you have needs, you kind of forgot what they were. You don't really
Hmm.
ascribe to your previous passions. And so I think it can definitely impact the mental load because if we are spending all of our time being a caretaker and then we get into the toddler years where that we're also basically being bullied by our toddlers from time to time, it could just be a really difficult thing to balance. Like, I'm giving so much to you, and then there's these difficult moments with you, and you're left feeling depleted on some of those days. And then you kind of forget, like, what even do I do to like what do I even like to do anymore? So I do think there's kind of a relearning process that I work through with a lot of clients of like, well, what things like sound fun to you, or
Hmm.
what things do you feel like would make you feel rested, or how do you feel loved by people, or, what things excite you about doing. And sometimes it's like, well, I used to enjoy, going to like a cycling class or whatever. So sometimes it's touching in with who you were previously to being a mom, but sometimes it's rediscovering new things that you think sound really fun to you. So it's definitely a work that we do in just trying to find those pieces and also having realistic expectations of how you're going to connect with that part of you because it's not going to look like how it used to look. So how do we balance the two so that you don't get frustrated and just give up those passions because it's just not working?
Yeah, it's like the self-care, the caring for ourselves that needs to be happening to avoid like spiraling into burnout involves that self-connection. And that's such an important
Hmm.
thing to remember is that it's not just the taking care of our basic needs, taking care of the things that we literally need to survive, but also
Hmm.
like being in touch with who we are and what we want and what brings us joy. Like
Yeah.
it really does matter. And if you're so
Hmm.
far disconnected from that, doing the work to reconnect and relearn what brings you joy is really important in that process.
Yeah, and maybe you've experienced or heard this before, but like moms a lot of times will tell me like, "Oh, like for self-care, I just take like a really like a nice shower." I'm like, "That's not self-care," but it really feels, it feels life-giving, which is great, but like just taking a shower, if that is your form of self-care, like we have to add in a couple more things because I think that that's your basic needs being met.
Yeah.
So, we're not talking about like self-care is going to happen an hour every day, but like how can we realistically find just like little small pockets of time through the week that you feel like you can do something a little extra for yourself. So it's a long shower is great. I'm never going to say don't do that, but I'm going to say like, I'm going to challenge you a little bit more to find something else that is going to like make you feel connected to yourself as a person.
Yeah, like you literally have other needs. Like you
Hmm.
are not just somebody who needs to get up and make sure you don't smell bad. Like maybe you
Yeah.
take a little longer washing off. It's like that's amazing. And like that extra time to yourself, like awesome. And maybe you're singing in the
Yeah.
shower. But yeah, it's like
Yeah.
you have other needs. There's the need to connect
Right.
to others. There's needs to like
Yes.
pursue your own goals and do things like that. Those
Hmm.
are all important
Hmm.
needs we have. And so
Hmm.
I think that is like such an important thing to know. And it's not any shame. And like, if those needs aren't going met right now, and maybe that's an area you need to work on, there's no shame there. But it's knowing that like,
Right.
can't expect to be showing up fully capable and willing to take care of
Hmm.
everybody else when like our needs are literally not even kind of being met.
Right. Yeah. And I think being a mom, and if you're a stay-at-home mom, that's an amazing thing too. Actually, I like to use the word if you're working in the home, not stay-at-home mom. But if you're working in the home as a mom, and like even if that is your full-time thing, is being with your kids all the time, I still challenge those moms to find something that really makes you feel passionate through the day that you can sneak in during nap time or when your partner is home and you have a little bit more free time. I just think building your identity to include other things that
Hmm.
support you as a mom is just so crucial.
10 out of 10 agree with that. So when it comes to tackling burnout, like tackling this like immense pressure we might feel and this
Mhm.
exhaustion, I know like I don't know, I always like to make sure when we're having these conversations there is acknowledgement of like the systematic issues in place that do
Yes.
make it really
Hmm.
hard to not feel burned out. Like it's not all on the
Yes.
individual mom. I mean, a lot of it is not on
No.
the individual mom. So I think knowing that like there's a lot of self-compassion that has to be given, but how can we then take
Mhm.
responsibility for the things that we can change? And like what can we do about that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I don't think our world or our, culture that we're in really, is allowing moms to thrive and be taken care of. There's a lot of change that needs to happen. But I think that there's a lot of things that we also can do internally with what we have currently. I think part of it is acknowledging that burnout and the mental load for moms that are like in the thick of
Mhm.
it is probably always going to be looming around there. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news that like it's just there. But I think the more that we can acknowledge that like we are just carrying heavy loads, the more that we can allow ourselves to lean into when we need breaks and stuff. So if we just try to pretend like
Yeah.
it's not going to be there, the denial is not helpful. So I think if we're able to say, especially when I say moms in the thick of it, I really kind of mean like postpartum to elementary, like as your kids go in elementary. And even when they're in elementary, there is a mental load, but then we're having kids that are a lot more self
Hmm.
sufficient. And so that really provides a little bit more freedom for us. And there's definitely challenges there. And there's still the mental load and there's still potential for burnout. But I think like when you're really truly like the lifeline for your children and they're cooking, changing, bathing, all of those things. I think it's so important that we are our own best cheerleader within ourselves and that we're like really just pepping ourselves up and saying like, hey, you are doing a great job today. Like, you're taking care of these kids. I know it's hard. Like, we really have to be aware of the voice within our head and is it being our biggest critic or is it being our biggest cheerleader and really making sure that we are empowering ourselves because our culture isn't really doing
Hmm.
that and sometimes we don't have really people in our corner that are doing it. We might not have a ton of friends or a supportive partner or a supportive family system, and so we have to look within ourselves and be like, hey, I really liked how you handled this today. Or like, you did a really good job keeping your cool today with X, Y, and Z. So I think that part is really important is just the positive self-talk. I think the other thing is also, like I continue to say, the self-awareness of where we are at with burnout. And hopefully we do have people in our corner. We do have like a supportive partner, or at least a partner that's willing to listen to how we're feeling. Or we have some extended family or some friends, because I do think it's important to be able to express how we're feeling when we're having a hard day. having, maybe a hard season, and also be able to ask for help in those times, because I think that is such an important part of avoiding or fixing burnout, is just being able to say, like, I am really struggling this week. Do you think I can take an hour this weekend and go do X, Y, and Z? Or, I really just need some extra help with the kids. I'm feeling really at my, wits end. I think it's so important to be able to have that communication open and be able to have somebody in your life that you can ask for help.
Yeah, I think that piece there about burnout always being right there, whether you're in it or not, is an important thing to just kind of keep in mind, that it's not that we are expecting this not to be hard. And so having the expectation that there is so much that we are going to be doing, and there are so many societal factors that we're up against, like just being able to be compassionate in that, and then also like valuing our work, valuing the things that we contribute, because there is such a devaluing of like caregiving for our children in our society. And so if we can like cheer ourselves on and value that,
Hmm.
sometimes that's a really hard shift to make, because it might feel
Yeah.
like, I'm, quote, just a mom or whatever it is.
Hmm.
It can be hard to shift into a place of like, I'm doing really important work right now. And
Hmm.
this isn't forever. This, changing the gross
Hmm.
diapers is not forever, but it is important. It's important work that I'm
Yeah.
doing, and like celebrating that work, celebrating the wins we have when it comes to parenting the way we want to parent. And that also can be hard.
Hmm.
And, not being too hard
Yeah.
on ourselves when we don't, but cheering ourselves on when we do. I
Yes.
think all of that is important. And then I think also, in knowing that it's hard, in knowing that there are a lot of things we're doing, knowing that asking for help with that makes sense, right? Like there's no shame in asking for help, because we have a lot on our plates. And, I don't want to like, I do think, acknowledging that like this isn't all mom's job. Like it's,
Yes.
but there might be
Yes.
societal factors that make it so that moms are
Yeah.
taking on so much of that load. And so knowing
Right.
like it makes sense that I need help with this. This is a lot of stuff that I'm doing. And so there's no
Hmm.
shame in asking for help. And if you have that support system, like it's a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah, right. And even if it's not your partner because of whatever
Hmm.
dynamics, even just like finding a friend who you can be like, hey, like I'm feeling really burned out. Can I drop my kids off,
Hmm.
for an hour, and I'll take your kids next week for an hour? Like you can find help in different places if it doesn't feel like, as much as I would want the relationship to be a supportive thing, we just know that that's not always going to be a thing.
Hmm.
And so trying to find alternative routes to be able to find that. And I wanted to say one more thing about what you started with, which I think is important, like the voice in your head and the cheerleader versus critic and, all that. I think part of the work that we do in therapy, which is my little plug for going to therapy right now, is that a lot of work that I do is around that inner talk, because most of the time that comes from your childhood. And so if you grew up as a perfectionist, or even like in an abusive family dynamic, or not a nurturing one, input all the other dysfunctions after that, I don't want to go into every single thing, but whatever your upbringing was as a child, most of the time that is going to impact how you talk to yourself, how you view yourself. And so if you really notice that you have a really hard time being okay with just showing up, that's probably because there's work for you to do deeper within that to get to a point where you feel like you're proud of yourself and you can acknowledge. So my little plug for therapy is, if you're having a really hard time breaking that inner self talk, it's probably because there's a little bit more work that needs to be done. I always tell my clients it's like learning a brand new language. So if it doesn't click the first couple days of like, oh, great job changing that diaper, like, or whatever, you're
Yeah.
having a hard time finding ways to praise yourself or acknowledge yourself, then, just stick with it. And if you're really kind of having a hard time, then there might be some more that you need to explore. And one more thing about that is that doesn't mean that we're just like glorifying ourselves all the time and we're saying like we're the best mom ever. Like I never make mistakes, because some people fear swinging to that end of things. And that's definitely not what I'm saying. Like we're talking about balance and being able to admit like this was not my best day and this is why, and I want to work on things. But it's a lot about, acknowledging that you're getting through the day, you're doing a good job, and recognizing that you still have room for growth, as we all do. And so having that balance is an important piece too.
Yeah, I think that is so important. And knowing that, like, we can have self compassion and understanding for maybe why something didn't go the way that we wanted it to, or if like we reacted in a way we didn't want to react. We can have the self compassion and also the desire to change that and to work on it. Like, those can
Yes.
exist at the same
Mhm.
time. And like,
Yep.
that's a great way to show up in life, right? To say,
Mhm.
man, like that, I did not like that. Like, I'm actually upset with myself,
Mhm.
even maybe a little bit for that
Mhm.
response. But like, also,
Mhm.
okay, maybe I can look at that and understand why and be curious and make a change. And I think knowing that, like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not just being like, throw it all to the wind and say,
Yeah.
whatever I do, however I show up
Rock,
is
you're the
great.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I so appreciate that mention of like why therapy can be so important. Therapy is so important for so many reasons, but I think that piece of like getting to the bottom of why certain things might be hard and allowing yourself to like heal, to work through things and change the language in a really like,
Mhm.
intentional, supported way is so huge. And
Mhm.
I'm like so glad we're at a place in our world where like we talk about going to therapy and it's like
Mhm.
fairly normal. I mean, just
Mhm.
like again, another thing that 10 years
Totally.
ago, that's not
Yes.
necessarily how it was. So
Right.
it's exciting to be existing
Yeah.
in this world where we have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about battling burnout, like we talked about earlier, the self-reflection, I think one of the biggest things that you can probably do on your own, but therapy could also help you with is being able to identify triggers for being overstimulated or burned out. I think that's really helpful because every mom's going to feel differently in different
Hmm.
situations. So you might be really triggered by loud noises, and that might completely wipe you out for the day, or if you're in that newborn phase and your baby's colicky and like crying a lot, maybe, just that consistent loud crying, that might burn you out. You might be really burned out by like the busyness. That might be a really big burnout piece for you. Or maybe you're burned out by touch. So I think that can be a really important piece of preventing and managing
Hmm.
burnout is knowing yourself as a mom and knowing like, I don't do well when we're go, go, go all the time. Then you're going to have to be someone who really looks at your schedule and reevaluates it to protect your peace so that you can parent in a way that you want to parent. So I think that is a really crucial thing to do some self reflection, sit down, journal, like, what are my top three triggers of being overstimulated or burnout? And really reevaluating, like, how do I manage those when those happen? I think that is a really key piece to really understanding yourself as a mom in a deeper way.
Yeah, like that reminder. I love that of like, it's not the same for all of us. The things that really trigger us are not the same. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, touch, like that's a
Yeah.
huge one for me. That's like probably the biggest thing I've dealt with. But my kids are almost 6 and like 2.5, no, 3.5. Like, how old is my little one? Um, but like even like when they're playing and they're like roughhousing and like worrying about their
Yeah.
safety, it's like even if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not even paying attention and it's like the noise may not be bothering me in that moment, whatever it is, it's like the constant like,
Yes.
having it in my mind. And that is a really like important, I don't know, reminder that like it's different for all of us. That's not the same
Mm-hmm.
thing that's going to trigger somebody else. And when we are aware of that, like that's an important piece to the puzzle, right?
Yeah. My friend always says like different mommies, different rules, like to our kids when like we have different roles. So it's like different mommies, different triggers, like
Yeah.
we all have like different things that really just like get us going. And a lot of that does come from childhood too, or our anxieties or whatever it
Hmm.
might be. But I just, like I said, I think the more that you really understand yourself as a mom, you can really not prevent those things from happening, but you can know, okay, we're going into this like my kid's been playing their little flute thing that all morning, and like I don't do well with noise, so like what do I need to do to like balance my nervous system before I continue to go into the rest of the day? So yeah, knowing yourself is definitely like a superpower.
Yeah, so important. Okay, as we wrap up the conversation, I love to ask guests at the end of the episodes about self-care because I'm all about like normalizing taking care of ourselves as moms. I think it's important we're just like having the conversation. So I would love to know how you take care of yourself and if you have any advice for moms to make sure that they are regularly caring for themselves as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question for sure. I know for me, like I definitely like to move my body and get some kind of like physical activity in. And I was having a really hard time finding space for that. And I also realized I don't do well working out at home. So I go to like 8 p.m. yoga classes a couple times a week. I'm really blessed that my studio does classes that late, but just finding that like kids are in bed, I'm not worried about finding childcare. My husband's home, like I'm set. Like that has been really freeing for me. So finding something that has worked for me that gives me life with that has been really helpful. And then I think, for me too, another big piece is I started a mom meetup group that we meet up once a week. And that's not maybe personalized individual care for me, but I feel like that has just helped me have connections and be able to like have moms that I can go to and talk about things. And then my husband and I go to a Bible study once a week and we do girls' nights, we do date night. So that's kind of nice because it's like all in one, like my spiritual connection, but also like we have those girls' nights where we can connect and we have our marriage nights that we can connect to away without the kids. And then we have family nights. So I think like just knowing that there's something on the calendar where I'm going to have a little bit of a break and we're going to get some time to connect with either some girls in our life or with, all of us as couples without our kids has been really helpful. So generally speaking, I think scheduling stuff and making sure it's on the calendar is a really important part of finding a way to connect with yourself because if it's not on the calendar, it's probably not going to happen because we're just like tired at the end of the day. So nobody wants to plan something, at the end of the day when they weren't expecting to do that. So those are probably my top three things, but it's a work in progress too for me as well.
Yeah, I think, that's the self-care really only helps if it actually happens. So totally
Hmm.
getting it on the schedule, making sure it happens. And I love like the idea of it's kind of like the time to connect with yourself, the time to connect with your body, the time to connect with your spiritual outlet, this time to connect with friends and other moms, the
Hmm.
time to connect with your partner, like
Yeah.
all of it. There's so many things that as humans we need, and that could feel like overwhelming in some ways, but it's like, but no, like
Hmm.
we need to prioritize those things. We need to know that it is important to get that. And so being
Hmm.
creative and getting as much of that as we can is really important, knowing that it does
Yeah.
actually like have an impact, a positive impact.
Yeah, I'm extroverted, so I get a lot of energy and connection from other people. But if you're introverted, your self-care is always going to look way different, and that's awesome too. But yeah, I always tell my moms, like, if you can do one thing for your mind, one thing for your body, one thing for your spirit through the week, then that is like a really good goal. And even if that's a 15-minute walk or a 15-minute meditation, like, even if you could just start there with that goal of trying to connect with all the pieces of who you are, the mind, body, spirit, that's a really good place to start with trying to build a self-care practice.
Yeah, love it. Love a good starting point.
Yes, yes.
Megan, where can moms find you? What should they look out for? I know your Instagram is awesome. Tell us about it.
Thanks. Yeah, you can find me at Mama Therapy House or my website's mamatherapyhouse.com. And this summer, I'm focusing on the calm mom summer kind of mindset. So just trying to have a more calm, centered summer as a mom. So just shooting out some tips about how to do that and some things to remember. And so if that sounds like something you want to work on, come join us over there on Instagram.
Amazing. 10 out of 10 recommend. It's a great follow and just a lot
Thank
of
you.
like compassionate tips, which is
Oh,
the
love
best, right?
that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. And thank you for tuning in. You are worthy, Mama.